Welcome to the channel. Thank you everyone for tuning in. So for today, I'm going to be doing a comparison between the SanMartin and the Seestern. Now, as you can see, both are 62 mass homages, and SanMartin recently came out with the one on my left. They made a much smaller version than the previous versions. And in the review, when I look at this 62 edge mass, I did state that I'll be doing a comparison between the Seestern. I also mentioned the 54 watch, but if I do all three, I think the video will be quite long, as this is going to be a critical comparison. Now, it has been a while since I've done one of those, and if you don't know what they are, I'll give you guys a quick look at the template. Now, just to summarize on how I do the critical comparisons, I'll basically break down every single element of the watch, going down into the very finer detail, looking at the differences in finishing on handsets, for example, the dial hour markers, the loom, the bezel style, the construction, the finishing, the polishing, and I score them objectively, right? So there's no subjectives involved, and I'll try to do it by value add. So which element has had more work on into it, i.e. a dial with an applied hour marker and a applied logo will cost slightly more than a dial with a printed logo. Now that cost, I don't know what that is. It could be 1 cent, a penny, 2 pence, but that's besides the point. It's just which one's just better, and then give them a value for money score. So that's how that comparison works. Now, I've only done these kind of comparisons with watches that are extremely similar, and where you guys have really questioned which one to get. So there's a playlist on my YouTube channel, so if you want to look at all the comparisons that I've done to date, you can check them out. And throughout these comparisons, you do actually learn quite a lot. So let's go ahead and let's begin, and let's talk you through the different specs that you've got between both watches and how they differ dimensionally. Now, with regards to the full specification, I'll put them up on screen for you guys. Let me just highlight the differences. There literally is no difference between the specifications, aside from one thing, which is the movement. The SanMartin to my left uses the Chinese ETA 2824 clone named the Pt5000, and the Seestern uses the good old trusty Seiko NH35. Now, between the movements, I'll get into them slightly later. I'll tell you what these watches are running, but right now all you guys need to know, that is the only difference between both watches. Now, there is a price difference. Also, the SanMartin is at £251, which is around $315-ish, and the Seestern is at a £142 for around $180. So a bit of a massive difference between the two. You're looking at around $135. So this review is quite critical if you are looking which one to buy. Now, I know a lot of people sometimes do think SanMartin is sitting at the top of the tree, and for most of the watches they are. Most of the models they come out with, but with this version there were a fair few issues. So and if you want to check out the full review on this watch, you can. I'll link it in the video in the description. So it's quite important that I get to do this comparison, and because this is a much cheaper version, and depending on the outcome, you might think actually this is probably more value for money, or no, I'd rather go for the SanMartin. So now, looking at the dimensions, both watches do have a 37mm case with a 38mm diameter at the bezel. Now, the first difference you'll see is on the depth. The SanMartin is 13mm thick and the Seestern is 13.7mm. So I think that's the benefit of using the Pt5000. I believe it is a slightly thinner movement. Now, next to that, the lug to lug, very similar. The Seestern is 46.5mm, whereas the SanMartin is about 46.8, so 0.3, not too much, but a slight difference still. Lug width on both is 20mm, of course, and the weight is extremely similar. You're looking at 165 grams on both full bracelets, unsized. It is quite difficult to see them apart, but hopefully in hand you can already see some of the subtle differences. Now, with these, I like to start off with the dial. Now, let's start off with the color versions and variants available. Seestern is the only one that does have other color versions. They've got a silver, they've got a black, they've also got that fume red, they've got that sunburst gray, and they've got this blue. The SanMartin only comes with this sunburst grey. Now, arguably, you could say that is the only colour you need. It's probably the best colour, but having variation is also good. That fume red dial is a fantastic dial colour from Seestern, and looks quite good in the blue as well. The black's awesome, and that grey is absolutely stunning as well. For the most part, both dials look more or less exactly the same. So the similarities are they both have a printed minute track, they both have applied hour markers with that polished silver frame, they both have date windows at the 3 o'clock. Both date windows are beveled. The only difference here is that the date window on the Seestern is just slightly thicker. You've got more of a beveled edge, whereas on the SanMartin it's just a bit thinner. You also got printed text at the 6. The difference on these dials is that applied logo. So SanMartin has that hex logo just below the 12. I like that logo. Not everybody does. Seestern is just plain and printed. Now, the difference between that text at the 6 is quite significant for myself. On the SanMartin, you've got thicker white text which states automatic 200 meters and that hideous equal sign to 660 foot. Whereas on the Seestern, a lot simpler, a lot finer, and it kind of sits in the background, which is what you want it to do. It just states automatic 200 meters, a lot simpler. So I preferred that definitely on that Seestern. Yeah, so the finishing, that sunburst effect is great on both. Both are very high quality dials, and the next set of differences we are going to see is on the finishing of the hands. Again, very similar hands, both are baton style hands, but the SanMartin does have a polished finish. The minute and the hour hand fully polished. You've got a chamfered edge on either side, which does give it some really nice reflection, and that polished seconds hand also, and you've got that baton on the tip. Now, the proportion and length is okay on the SanMartin, it's good. It does seem to touch that minute track. However, on the Seestern, you've got definitely a lot more detailing present. You can see that center of those hands is actually brushed in a linear fashion, which gives it a much nicer look, in my opinion. There's a lot more workmanship gone into these hands. So you've got that chamfered edges on either side, that center brushing, and that seconds hand is brushed as well in a linear fashion. But just look at that tip, that needle point is extended on the Seestern, and this has probably got a better proportion on the handset. Even on that minute hand, you can see it does graze the top of those minute markers, and that seconds hand goes all the way to the end. So I really like that length, and the brushing helps set these hands apart from the dial and the hour markers. So between the two, definitely the hands are better on that Seestern. Let's go ahead, check out that Loom, because that's where we'll see our next difference. Now, initially, both watches look pretty much the same, and they haven't had any direct UV exposure just from the lights in this room. Now, what you'll notice is the SanMartin is slightly greener, and the Loom looks a lot more solid on the SanMartin than it does on the Seestern. The Seestern is the one on the left, and you can see already it is slightly, just ever so slightly duller. And clearly the SanMartin has had a few more layers of Loom applied. You do see a bit of patchiness present on the hour markers on the Seestern. The hands are fine on both models. The pip at the 12 o'clock, again, fine on both models. But there is a clear difference on the Loom applied on the hour markers. But you do have that Loom date wheel on the Seestern, which, as you can see, it is glowing perfectly fine. But overall, I'd say the SanMartin just takes it on the Loom side. Just slightly better Loom than the Seestern. Now, the way I've scored the first round on the dial, it is swinging towards Seestern's way, and that's because the Seestern has got just more colors, and it also has a loomed date wheel. And another smaller feature is that it's got slightly smaller text on the automatic. So on 3 little points, I felt the Seestern did differ slightly, although the Loom was, better on the SanMartin. But everything considered, it's a 6-5, a very close score. Now, the next thing we want to look at is the crystal used. And as stated, both watches do use a AR coated box style sapphire crystal. The difference here is that you've got a bit more of a box crystal on the SanMartin. You can just see that edge there protruding above the bezel. And the Seestern just has a very small lip. Both are domed as well. But, irrespective of how high that dome is, I think a box style sapphire crystal, they are a lot more expensive than the normal ones. I think they both must have been the same price. But yeah, that is a bit more of a preference as well, how high you like it. I think both are good. But the main thing is they're both sapphire, both AR, and they both are boxed. So both of them score evenly for that one, 1-1. And the next thing we want to look at is the bezel. So let's look at the style of bezel first and foremost. So they both are a coin edge bezel. The difference here on the SanMartin is that you've got a more of a pronounced coin edge. You got a lot more grip there. You can just see the teeth there. You've got that brushing along the top lip, and what that means is you get much better grip on that bezel. Now on the Seestern, you've got still coin edge, but the teeth are a lot finer, and it slips just a bit more. You still got that brush finishing on the lip, and you can just see the coin edge there. In terms of movement, rotation, both are brilliant. Both do line up perfectly well. They don't have any play in there at all. And of course, SanMartin, you guys know their bezel game is on point. Let's compare the rotation between the two. Yeah, very nice rotation, very tactile, positive clicks, you know, perfect alignment. And even with the gloves, I find it really easy to do due to the teeth and the design. Perfect. Seestern, you know, due to that, again, that grip, it's going to be slightly less. The gloves are kind of slipping, but the rotation's good, the alignment's good. It feels just slightly different. You know, I think subjectively, I do like how the SanMartin one feels. But between the two, there's nothing actually wrong with them both. They both are perfect. In terms of the bezel insert, now you can see they're both, again, very similar, but still quite different. They both have a Loom pip. And the Seestern uses slightly thicker white markers around. They both are ceramic as well. They both have debossed markers. This one is not as deep on the SanMartin, just slightly shallower. But the SanMartin one, finer font, slightly more debossing present, but again on the ceramic. So, you know, it depends what you like when you get here, thicker markers or thinner ones. I do prefer the thinner ones, and I think this just looks slightly better. In terms of quality, it's a very tough call, you know. So let's see how I scored this one. So the bezel goes to the SanMartin, quite similar in everything else, but just that grip swayed it for the SanMartin. So you got a 4-3 there. Just above that, the sapphire crystal both scoring 1. So let's go ahead, look at the case. This is where we'll see a few more differences. So the first and foremost is the shape of the case. While they both have a very similar case shape, you do have a few differences already. So I don't know if you notice, if you pay attention to the lugs, SanMartin lugs seem just a bit more squared off, a bit more rectangular, whereas the ones on the Seestern do slightly taper in a bit more. Now I measured this and I found that the Seestern is around 25.6 millimeters edge to edge, and the SanMartin is 0.5 millimeters bigger from either side, a total of around 26.9 millimeters. So you can just see that when I put both cases together. So a much more rectangular look on the SanMartin, but just slightly tapered on that Seestern. And you know what, I don't know in terms of what's better. I do like the look on the Seestern a bit better. I think it makes the case shape just slightly more refined. Now then move on to the finishing. Now both have brushed and polished surfaces. The A face on that SanMartin is fully brushed. You can see that grain quite coarse, not in feel, but you can just see that grain is quite visible. In comparison to that Seestern, just a lot finer grain. It just looks so much nicer, very nice and smooth. Now additionally, what Seestern have on the edges of those lugs is those polish highlights, which as you guys can see, there's a lot more going into the case already. Got these really nice transitions, and also on the Seestern, the sides of the case are fully brushed as well, and the drilled lugs. Now the SanMartin has gone for the classic look, which is those polished sides, as you can see here, and the drilled lugs. Now away from that finishing, now of course the comfort, the fit, and as you guys are well aware if you saw the review on this, this is quite edgy, edgy enough to peel a potato. This one not so much. I know people were saying that, you know, these cases do have a defined edge, but there's a clear difference between a defined edge and just being just quite noticeably edgy. So this is nowhere near like the SanMartin. It's just refined quite a lot more. But the SanMartin, unfortunately, just here does have quite a sharp edge. The next difference is the crown. The crown size on the SanMartin is 6.9 millimeters. Sits slightly thicker as well, giving you a much better grip. The Seestern is 6.4, slightly slimmer. I mean, they both are quite proportionate to the cases, but the 6.2 mass itself had a few versions as well. It had a big crown version that you can see to my left and a slightly smaller crown. So this one, even with these gloves on, no issue with that. Threading is good as well. Get it, catch it, yeah, there we go. Turns perfectly well. And then you've got also some signage present on the crown. Same thing for the Seestern, signage present. I just haven't took off that blue sticker, but you know, because it's just slightly thinner, still doable with gloves, but just slightly more awkward with the gloves. But overall, you know, it's actually not difficult to do it as well with this size, but just the one on the SanMartin is just that little bit better. And what else do we have? So case back, both, you know, they are different logos, but I think they both finished equally well. They do have quite a bit of designing gone into this, engraving gone into it, so they both score evenly on that one. So overall on the case, I think, let me get you the scoring out. So on the case, again, very even score, quite close, but the Seestern did take it with a 4-3. In terms of the size difference, as I stated along the lugs, you know, the shape, you know, I didn't really score that. But on the brushing and the finishing of the actual case, SanMartin Seestern did definitely get the win. Nicer brushing, those polished, edgy highlights, and just nicer finishing along the side of the case as well, and not as edgy. Comfort-wise, yes, edgy, and you know, comfortable on the Seestern. The weight was exactly the same. Crown was just slightly bigger, just slightly better grip. So SanMartin did get a point on that, and I think that kind of saved it on this section. Otherwise, that would have scored probably a bit worse. But yeah, 4-3 for the case. Now, let's move on to the bracelets. This is where it's going to get quite interesting. Now, when it comes to the bracelet, you know, this is the first time looking at this bracelet, and I did test it out before I'd done the review. Let's look at the measurement, because both have got, you know, really funny end links. Now, the SanMartin comes in at 56.8 millimeters. The second link doesn't actually fully fold down, it doesn't articulate, so you're left with this kind of space, and it doesn't go beyond that. And I stated in this video, if you got a wrist smaller than 6.5 inches, then this will sit quite loose on the wrist. Now, the problem with the Seestern, the end links, the center link here does look quite long, but it is actually shorter than the SanMartin. This comes in at 52.7 as opposed to 56.8, so this will wear a lot better on a smaller wrist. In terms of construction quality, both are really well made. Both have got solid end links, all solid links. So this is a 3-link design, this is also a 3-link design. Both do have screw-in links, both are really good quality. And the clasps are quite similar, but the SanMartin does steal it on the clasp side. Very nice brushing in comparison to the Seestern. Still fine, but the SanMartin one just looks a lot better. The clasp is also formed on the sides. You've got the polished highlights on either side. You've got 4 micro adjusts, and the Seestern does actually come with 6 micro adjusts and twin pushers, as does this one. This one does not have a flip lock. Okay, it is milled, so is this milled, and this one does have a flip lock, which is actually highly polished, so that will scratch up very nicely, as it probably already has. But yeah, so it's a tough call between the two, but you know, just on the face of it, you can clearly tell this bracelet just has had a lot more work gone into it, especially when you look at the center links. You've got the polished chamfered edges on either side, the brushing in the center, so there's a lot more detail and craftsmanship gone into this bracelet. But comfort wise, this is very edgy. It's edgy between these links as well, and this particular one had some poor finishing on one of the links. Yeah, so between those 2 links here, you can just see on the edge towards me, it's just a little bit rough. But that was only on 2 links, and maybe it's an anomaly, because SanMartin do have really good QC for the most part. But the Seestern bracelet, it does have an edge to it, but it's not edgy like the SanMartin one, so it is kind of refined a bit better. You've got this really nice satinized brushing present also, but very different links. So, you know, tough one to score. And I did go for a 3-2 in favor of the SanMartin, just because there's a lot more work gone into this bracelet. So how do both watches wear on wrist? How does the detail of the case and bracelet translate when you are wearing it on your wrist? You know, it's a very difficult one to call. They both look quite different on wrist. They both do tend to wear really well, and that's due to the dimensions first and foremost, and the entire case shape. But what I'll say is I find the Seestern seems to fit better, and it looks slightly better as well due to those lugs tapering in along the top, whereas the SanMartin does seem to sit a bit flatter. But in terms of comfort, you do get a very snug fit on that Seestern. You do get a better wraparound on wrist, and it is a lot more comfortable compared to the SanMartin. So the bracelet is not as edgy, and nor is the case. And especially for my wrist size, which is 6.5 inches, I feel the Seestern is a much better fit than the SanMartin. But it isn't a day and night difference. I've got to say, this was quite tough to determine which one's better. But overall, I do prefer the look of the Seestern over the SanMartin. Both are evenly matched. They both scored 16. at every point there's been pros and cons on either one. Slight differences in favor of SanMartin or the Seestern. So then we bring the movement in. Now the Pt5000 movement, bit of a pricier movement. Is it better? That is quite broad. Better in the sense that it's high beat. I don't think high beat necessarily makes a watch movement better. What we know about the NH35, it is a proven and reliable workhorse movement. It's not a clone of anything. It is actually from Seiko. But the Pt5000, of course, being a clone of the ETA 2824, it does have some of the shared issues. You can have a oiling problem on this movement, which is quite common. There's a lot of people saying they've got issues with the Pt5000 movements, where as you turn the winder, the rotor also spins. Some of them do need quite a bit of torque. They're quite stiff to turn. This one thankfully is okay. So it's a tough call between the movement, but just on the face of it, I gave an extra point to the SanMartin for using the Pt5000. Now I did put it on the time grapher, and this is just a comparison between these two particular movements, not a general overall sort of view. But the one in the SanMartin was running at 0, right? Pretty much perfect. 0 plus or minus a day, and it had 0.1 beat error, I believe, but running very consistently, good amplitude. So this would be a very accurate watch. The NH35 wasn't far off. Beat error was 0.3 and it was plus 4 seconds a day, but that does fluctuate quite a bit. I think both in terms of accuracy will be quite good. They'll be under 5 seconds. The Seiko will be a lot more reliable. It will run for a lot longer, but just the fact that it is a high beat movement, I just gave you the point. So the overall score is 17 versus 16. And what does that say? So that basically says the Seestern has a slightly better dial, but the SanMartin has better loom. You've also got the bezel is better on the SanMartin, and the case is better on the Seestern, and the bracelet is better on the SanMartin. Just edgy though, bear that in mind. So that is where these watches stand now in comparison to what they cost. So you've got £142 price for the Seestern and a £251 price. It is definitely a no-brainer. The Seestern does win this one as being the more better value for money watch. I think, which it definitely is. Like I said, it's not far off the SanMartin, and in some aspects it's a lot better. But I did say the SanMartin here, this 6.2 mass homage, is grossly overpriced. This should be a lot closer to the £200 mark. It's just too far out in terms of pricing. £250, $230, it's just way too much for that. So here we have the winner, guys. Let me know in the comment section if you score them differently or if you've got a different viewpoint. But I believe this is the right choice. The Seestern is definitely the one to go for. So that's my overall view. That's my summary on both watches, and I will link both watches within my description if you want to check them out. Also have a look at my eBay store. I got a lot of straps on there, watches, etc. And that's it from me today, guys. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you on the next video.